Hi, it's Ashley, your favorite loan officer. I've been getting this question a lot about the housing market. Is there a housing bubble? Should I wait to buy? Should I buy now? What do you think? I don't have a crystal ball, but I can give you in the next video. I'm going to talk more about what the market's like, what we are predicting, what the very smart people are predicting for 2020 with the housing market. But I thought I would give some context to where the fear comes from, because I completely understand the fear of spending too much on a house and then it not being as worth as much as you're purchasing it for. Because if you've lived through the housing crisis or the Great Recession, that's a very real concern that has, very serious implications. And if you've heard about it, you know that there's very deep fear about that. So I wanted to go back and talk about what the mortgage industry was like in 2007, 2008, 2009, and give you some context to compare it to how it is now. So I have been full-time in the mortgage industry for 15 years, which I know, it's really surprising. I know I don't look a day over 30, it's amazing. So I started in 2007, which was a great time. My parents were so proud that I got into the industry at the worst possible time. But it was so different. It was so different then. We had hundreds of loan programs. Some of the names were no income, no assets, or stated income, stated assets, meaning you're just going to tell us how much money you make, how much money you have saved, all the things. And we're just going to go, okay, you can have some money now. So that was happening then. I also had a coworker once say, there's nothing stopping someone from putting all of their down payment on credit cards, which, now is hilarious because that would never happen. In some cases, I'm going to be asking you about a $10 deposit. There was years of that. There was years that I had to ask about, very small deposits, but it's getting better. Now it's like $250. I have to ask where that large deposit came from. So that would never happen now, but that was happening then. And another huge thing that was happening in 2008 was when really, really hit the fan. But before that, with appraisals, there were large banks in particular that had their own appraisal department employed by the bank. So you can see where values might get a little inflated because if they want the deal to get done, they work for the same company. You could also, we didn't have that, the place that I worked didn't have that situation, but we did get to pick who the appraiser is. And I can imagine that if you had a good relationship with them and they weren't the most ethical, you could probably figure that out too. I can see how that could all happen. That no longer exists. We don't get to pick our own appraisers. We don't get to contact them at all. It all goes through a system. So there's a lot of layers that have been added due to that time period. So that the worry about inflation of values as far as appraisers, shady appraisers and loan officers and those things, that can be sort of, let me ease your mind that that's not happening. Or they're very good at they're crossing a couple lines, you know what I mean? So that wasn't happening. And I think another thing that people don't realize, especially when we're all trying to figure it out, is that when the market dropped off and values went down, people couldn't sell their home because they now owed more than the house was worth, and their options were a short sale, which means that you go to the bank and say, will you accept this lower sum of money so that I can sell my house? Foreclosure, meaning you stop payments, they start the foreclosure process. That's a more legal scenario. You could or stay in the house until values rise back up. So during that time, what a lot of people don't realize is that we didn't have a good tracking system for who owns the mortgage. So Evergreen, we close the loan, we service a large portion of our loans, or we sell them to another investor to service them, meaning you're going to be making your payments to them. Back then, almost everyone sold their loans. So they sold them on the secondary market to an investor, and they got sold a lot. So when you go into do a short sale or foreclosure, or even a loan modification where you're like, I can't make my payment, help me out. Then you had to track down the lender to even have this conversation with, and there was no database for that. So you could want to do all those things, but if you can't find the person to do those, that's, it's a very distressing time, really. And it leads to a distressed property. Now we have a system where it's a registry. So we're always going to know who owns the loan. You can always find out. So that won't happen anymore. So those things have been sort of fixed. During that time, we had a bunch of inventory because we have a lot of distressed properties. So all of these, they would hit the market at different times because the foreclosure process is longer than a short sale. And a short sale, at the beginning, some banks would take months to even respond to a short sale. So it's a buyer and seller, like the bank has to agree, and it could take months to hear back from the bank in certain scenarios. So it was not a great time. But those things, now we have now banks know what to do with a short sale. They weren't prepared for that. They weren't prepared for that much inventory or what to do with a home that's been sitting for 3 years that has no one living in it and get it ready to be on the market. So now we've kind of figured that out. Hopefully we won't have the volume that we did. I would be, I never say never, I suppose, but, now we qualify people, with verifying income and assets and stuff. So, that hopefully won't be happening again. So that's sort of what it was like. But in 2012, the conversation was, have we hit the bottom of the market? Because we don't know. And the big question was, are there shadow inventory? Are banks holding on to properties because they want to wait till there's less inventory? So, all of this. There was no shadow inventory, by the way. That was a conversation that went on for so long. No shadow inventory. So we really hit the bottom, I would say, in 2012 with values and inventory. So we had months of inventory then. And interest rates were low. So interest rates were in the low 3s in 2012. And then we started to rise back up with values. And now 10 years later, it feels like we're at the peak. However, the market is different because of inventory. And we'll talk more about that in the next video, but you have to remember there's a large portion of time where new construction builders were out of business. So new construction wasn't happening. So there was a lag for a long time about new construction, new homes for people. And now you also have people that had a distressed property and couldn't do financing because there's a waiting period after you have a financial event like that. And now they're back in the market. So we've got a lot of people, and a lot of, a lot of other factors in play. But I think the biggest thing about 2007, 2008, was that we weren't qualifying people. And we really, really worked to find a balance on what's a good amount of documentation, what's too much. And now people have to qualify to buy a home, which seems so obvious. And you have to have money down. So those concerns, that fear is so valid because it was so concerning. But I think we should feel good that if we won't have another housing crisis to that scale because we've made some corrections. Okay, so in the next video, I'll go more about the current market, which I know you're dying to know, but I really thought it was helpful to give some context to why that fear is very real and very valid. And the industry got a really bad rap, justifiably so, because of what happened. And there's really been some great strides to make sure that doesn't happen again. At least we're not going to be responsible for another recession. So, okay, I'll see you in a little bit.